We're listening to Alberta Morning on CKUA, and next up, a conversation about a fascinating new show presented by Edmonton's Mile Zero Dance, which starts today, running April 13th, 14th, and 15th, and incorporating concepts related to sci-fi, cyborgism, and mycology. Parallax is a multimedia production exploring the sometimes blurry intersection between the human, the technological, and the cosmic. And I'm thrilled to say that the creator of Parallax, Eryn Tempest, joins us on CKUA right now. Eryn, how excellent to have you with us. Thank you so much for being here, and welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
I'm really intrigued right off the bat, Eryn, by this sort of science fiction bent, obviously, that you're bringing to this new work. Just from a purely personal perspective, how far back does your interest in sci-fi and the projections of the future go?
I think I've always been really interested in sort of world building type things. Like I was a big fantasy fan when I was younger, and just any genre that presents sort of different realities and new versions of, human beings and societies and interpersonal relationships and relationships to the planet and to the stars is really very cool and generative for me. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of the X-Files and love like science fiction films.
So you describe yourself as being interested in the body as a builder of worlds and in using technology to render those worlds visible. How in this show does your use of technology kind of address and accomplish that?
The idea of the body being a builder of worlds is something that I borrowed from this book, Glitch Feminism by Legacy Russell. As a dancer, I really love this idea that the body is not this sort of discrete, unified thing, but rather something of a storyteller and a world builder. And I think with the work that I've been doing with technology, and specifically in the Parallax, I'm really exploring like screen-based technologies that present like an image of the body or the face as a tool to sort of build new worlds and new versions of embodiment and identity, like an expanded version of identity that just sort of opens up, I think, or I hope, opens up how we think about our bodies and how we think about each other and, relationally, how we move through the world and how we have some agency over how we embody in the world as well.
That is fascinating. And I know that a lot of your interest in glitch is kind of represented here through the technology that you're interfacing with. When people encounter Parallax, obviously it has movement at the heart of it, but it's also a multimedia presentation. Can you paint us a bit of a picture of what audiences will encounter when they go to the show?
Yeah, it really leans very heavily into the technology side of things. I've been really interested in general, but specifically with this show, in exploring the relationship between the live and I guess the pre-recorded, for example, in terms of video. So there's a lot of playing with the blending of presence and absence, something that was recorded in the past and edited versus something that's happening live in the space. And because the installation that I dance in and that I am working with, because it almost entirely blocks the view of my flesh body from the audience, it becomes very confusing what exactly is going on. I think that is a really interesting use of these technologies and an interesting sort of analogy for how we're encountering, our smartphones and video conferencing and all of this stuff. Like there's a bit of ambiguity as to, when these things are happening and like if they're real. And I think a Parallax is, to a degree, sort of riffing off of this real world experience that we're all having.
Yeah, like the video conferencing meetup that we're having right now to discuss this piece of work, for instance. That's fascinating.
Exactly.
So cool. There's so many different levels and layers to this. And also, I can't help but be fascinated by the intriguing mention of mycology. That's mushrooms, right? How are mushrooms involved here, Eryn?
Yeah, mushrooms are a thing I became really sort of fixated on a few years ago because I read in this book called The Mushroom at the End of the World. And in the introduction, the author is talking about fungi or mycelium, which is the actual organism, is like this sort of web-like mat that grows, well, in many different places, but we would maybe typically think of it as growing in the soil. And the author talks about mycelium as being this organism of indeterminate form, very different from human beings and very different from how human beings think about life and think about life forms. And this was a very interesting idea to me, certainly as a mover, as a dancer, because I think, at least for me as a dancer, I've always been really interested in ways of moving that create some confusion in how the body is structured, which of course there's only a certain degree that you can explore that with live dance, because the body is of course more or less like a pretty determinate form. So I started to explore fungi and mycelium as this sort of like metaphor or sort of a way to conceptualize what other structures are doing in the body. And that brought me also to thinking through the idea that a huge percentage of our bodies, the things that we identify as I, is actually made up of, bacteria and like non-cellular matter that has its own kind of thing going on. It's not really from us. It's not created by our bodies, for example. It's like this ecosystem approach to thinking through the body. And so mycology just became this really cool way to explore things that are alive that don't have a determinate form and that, have this ability to expand beyond any sort of containing thing and have a very different relationship also to time, because as I understand it, mycelium is, or certainly can be, effectively immortal unless it's destroyed by like environmental toxins or various other external things. And of course, like human beings, we have a pretty more or less clear timeline. And I just, was just thinking, what would it be like and how would I embody differently if I had this ability to sort of transform my body and had this knowledge that, my life would extend like into the distant future and maybe had extended from the distant past, and just reimagining how I could think my body differently, I suppose, and what that would do also in my life and in the work that I'm creating.
Totally fascinating, and the term parallax seems to be exactly perfect for this, for the title for this piece, as that's like the parallax effect is like you're not quite seeing what you think you're seeing, right?
I really like this title actually, because yeah, what you're describing is maybe partially this celestial term or this astronomical term to discuss how seeing like a celestial body from different places is going to change where it, like the position of it, for example, in the sky. But it also is a term from early animation or from animation where it's talking about like the different layers of depth in animation are moving at different speeds. For example, if it's like, I don't know, the Flintstones or something, and one of them is running and the foreground is maybe moving more quickly than the background, which is moving more slowly, to give this illusion of depth. And in parallax, there's quite a lot of play with perspective and these like sort of optical illusions that occur through this play. And I think there is quite a lot of illusion of depth or illusion of multiplicity or fragmentation, which for me really feels like that word, parallax.
I love how you are informed by everything from glitch feminism to relating things to the Flintstones. That is truly brilliant. You're bringing worlds together, Eryn. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I can't help but think this might be an opportune time to spin a recent song by King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard called Mycelium, if that works for you.
That sounds great. I can't wait.
Well, thank you so much for this, Eryn. What an awesome conversation. It's been such a treat having a chance to learn a little bit more about parallax, which is going to be hitting Mile Zero Dance this week.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was really fun.
That is Eryn Tempest, the creator behind Parallax, presented in Edmonton by Mile Zero Dance, April 13th through the 15th. And you can check out milezerodance.com for details and tickets.